The Trap Springs. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the flagship Resilience, watching the stars through the massive viewport as her fleet dropped out of hyperspace. 57 ships of humanity's deep space fleet emerged in perfect formation around the designated meeting point, their hulls gleaming silver against the cosmic darkness. After 50 years of peaceful cooperation with the Galactic Federation, this was supposed to be another routine diplomatic mission. The invitation had come from the hegemony, an ancient species that claimed to have discovered new trade routes through previously unexplored sectors. Their message was formal and polite, requesting a meeting with Earth's representatives to discuss mutual benefits. The Federation Council had approved the mission enthusiastically, seeing it as another opportunity to expand human influence in the galaxy. Captain Marcus Rivera, Chen's trusted tactical officer, stood beside her reviewing the sensor data. His dark eyes narrowed as he studied the readings. Something felt wrong, though he couldn't put his finger on what. The meeting coordinates were in an empty system, far from any major trade routes or inhabited worlds. For a species interested in trade, the hegemony had chosen an oddly isolated location. Commander Zara Okafor worked at her engineering station, monitoring the fleet's systems. Her brilliant mind was always analyzing, always looking for patterns and solutions. Today, she felt the same unease that seemed to grip the entire bridge crew. The hegemony ships weren't visible yet, but their energy signatures were massive, far larger than anything in the Federation's databases. The first sign of trouble came when the hegemony fleet decloaked. 12 enormous vessels materialized around the human formation, each one larger than Earth's biggest dreadnoughts. Their design was unlike anything humanity had encountered, with smooth, organic curves that seemed to pulse with dark energy. These weren't trade ships. They were warships built for conquest. Admiral Chen's communication officer received an incoming transmission, and the main screen flickered to life. The being that appeared was tall and graceful, with pale blue skin and eyes like liquid silver. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of countless centuries and absolute authority. "I am sovereign nexus of the hegemony," the alien said, its words translated by the ship's systems. "You are humans, the youngest species to join the Federation, yet already you spread across the galaxy like a plague. Your expansion ends today." The truth hit Admiral Chen like a physical blow. This wasn't a trade meeting. It was an execution. The hegemony had lured humanity's finest fleet into a trap, far from any possible reinforcement. She keyed her communicator to address the entire fleet, knowing that panic would only make their situation worse. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. We are under threat from hostile forces. Prepare for combat operations, but maintain formation. We will find a way through this." Sovereign Nexus continued its pronouncement, clearly enjoying the moment. "Long ago, our empire stretched across this entire galaxy. We ruled with wisdom and strength until we chose to withdraw and observe from the shadows. Now we return to reclaim what is ours, but first, we must eliminate the greatest threat to our restoration." Captain Rivera's tactical displays lit up with warnings as the hegemony ships began charging their weapons. Energy readings spiked to levels that shouldn't have been possible. Whatever technology these aliens possessed, it was far beyond anything the Federation had developed. "Why us?" Admiral Chen asked, playing for time while her ships prepared for battle. "Humanity has always sought peace with other species." The alien's expression might have been a smile, though it held no warmth. "Because you are the only species that refuses to accept limitations. The Zephyrians build magnificent cities, but never venture beyond their borders. The crystalline collective pursues knowledge, but lacks ambition. Even the warrior Korath know when they are beaten. But humans, you see obstacles as challenges. You turn defeats into victories. You make the impossible merely difficult." Commander Okafor listened to this exchange while her mind raced through possibilities. The hegemony's assessment of humanity was accurate, perhaps more than they realized. Humans did have a unique approach to problems, a tendency to find solutions where none seemed to exist. If they could survive the next few minutes, that same creativity might be their salvation. The first exchange of fire was devastating. The hegemony's weapons tore through human shields like they were made of paper, while humanity's most powerful plasma cannons barely scratched the alien vessel's hulls. 3 human ships were destroyed in the opening seconds, their crews lost before they could even return fire effectively. Admiral Chen gritted her teeth as damage reports flooded the bridge. The Courage was venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. The Defiance had lost main power and was drifting helplessly. The Valor managed to score several direct hits on a hegemony vessel, only to watch their shots dissipate harmlessly against some kind of energy barrier. All ships implement scatter pattern delta, Chen ordered. The human fleet broke formation, ships peeling away in different directions to make themselves harder targets. It was a desperate move, but staying together would only make the slaughter easier for their enemies. Captain Rivera coordinated the retreat, his tactical genius finding ways to use the system's asteroid field and gravitational anomalies to their advantage. Some ships managed to find cover behind large asteroids, while others used the gravity wells of distant planets to slingshot away from the ambush zone. The running battle continued for hours. The hegemony ships were faster and more powerful, but they seemed content to toy with their prey rather than finish them quickly. Sovereign Nexus wanted to make an example of humanity, to show the galaxy what happened to species that dared to challenge the natural order. By the time the surviving human ships reached the edge of the system, they had lost nearly half their fleet. 28 ships had been destroyed, with thousands of brave men and women dead or missing. The remaining vessels were battered and barely functional, their crews exhausted and demoralized. As they prepared to jump to hyperspace, Admiral Chen received one final transmission from Sovereign Nexus. The alien's image appeared on her screen, its silver eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Run, little humans," it said mockingly. "Return to your Earth and tell your leaders what you have seen. The hegemony is coming to reclaim the galaxy, and your species will be the first to fall. You have 6 months to prepare for your extinction." The transmission ended, and the surviving human ships flowed into hyperspace, carrying news of the disaster back to Earth. Behind them, the hegemony fleet began its slow advance toward the core worlds of the Federation, confident in their technological superiority and certain of their ultimate victory. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated what humans could accomplish when their backs were against the wall. In the depths of space, aboard the damaged ships of the retreating fleet, brilliant minds were already working on solutions to problems that seemed impossible to solve. Commander Okafor stared at her engineering displays, studying the sensor data from the battle. The hegemony's technology was advanced, but it followed predictable patterns. Their energy shields operated on specific frequencies, their weapons drew power from centralized sources, and their ships, despite their size, showed structural weak points that a creative mind might exploit. Admiral Chen stood in her ready room, composing the message that would change everything. Earth's leaders needed to know about the threat, but more importantly, they needed to understand that this wasn't just about survival. This was about proving that humanity deserved its place among the stars, that the newest members of the galactic community could stand against the oldest and most powerful. As the fleet jumped toward Earth, carrying the wounded and the survivors, none of them knew that they were about to unleash something the galaxy had never seen. The hegemony expected humans to cower and surrender when faced with superior force. Instead, they were about to discover what happened when humanity's greatest strength, their refusal to accept defeat, was combined with their unlimited capacity for innovation. The trap had been sprung, the gauntlet thrown down, and the war that would determine the future of the galaxy had begun. The hegemony had 6 months to savor their victory, but humanity had 6 months to do what they did best: turn an impossible situation into an opportunity for triumph. The unleashing. 6 months after the disaster at Kepler 442, the hegemony fleet moved steadily toward the Federation's core worlds, leaving a trail of conquered systems in their wake. Sovereign Nexus stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching another planet surrender without a fight. The galaxy's species were proving as weak and predictable as he had expected. Only the humans had shown any real resistance, and their pathetic fleet had been crushed easily. What Nexus didn't know was that humanity had spent those 6 months in frantic preparation. Every shipyard in human space worked around the clock. Every brilliant mind focused on a single goal: finding a way to defeat an enemy with superior technology and overwhelming firepower. Dr. Elena Vasquez worked in a hidden research facility deep within the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Her team of quantum physicists had been studying the sensor data from the battle, looking for weaknesses in the hegemony's seemingly invincible technology. What they discovered would change the nature of warfare forever. The breakthrough came when Dr. Vasquez realized that the hegemony's energy shields operated on a principle of dimensional displacement. Instead of absorbing or deflecting energy, they shifted incoming attacks into parallel dimensions where they caused no damage. It was elegant and seemingly unbeatable, except for one crucial flaw. The displacement field has to maintain coherence across multiple dimensional layers, she explained to Admiral Chen during a secure holographic conference. If we can create a resonance cascade at the right frequency, the entire shield matrix should collapse. Admiral Chen listened intently from the bridge of her new flagship, the Indomitable. The ship was unlike anything in Earth's previous fleet, built using revolutionary design principles developed by Commander Okafor and her engineering teams. Where traditional ships relied on heavy armor and powerful shields, the new vessels emphasized speed, agility, and adaptability. Commander Okafor had taken the lessons learned from humanity's defeat and turned them into advantages. If the hegemony's weapons could penetrate any shield, then shields became secondary to mobility. If their ships were larger and more powerful, then humanity would build smaller, faster vessels that could strike from unexpected angles. The new human fleet consisted of 200 ships, each one a masterpiece of engineering innovation. They were smaller than the vessels they replaced, but infinitely more capable. Their hulls were made from a new metamaterial that could shift its properties on command, becoming dense armor against energy weapons or transforming into a near-perfect stealth surface that fooled most sensors. Lieutenant James Park sat in the cockpit of his fighter, part of the strike wing attached to the Indomitable. At 25, he was one of the youngest pilots in the fleet, but his reflexes and tactical instincts had earned him a place in Admiral Chen's elite squadron. Today, he would help test humanity's new approach to warfare against the most powerful enemy the galaxy had ever known. The human fleet had been tracking the hegemony's advance, staying just beyond sensor range while waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came when Sovereign Nexus's forces entered the Ta Ceti system, confident that they would face the same weak resistance they had encountered everywhere else. Admiral Chen stood on her bridge, surrounded by officers who had survived the first battle and learned from its lessons. Captain Rivera coordinated the fleet's movements with precision, born of desperation and determination. Commander Okafor monitored the new systems that would make or break humanity's gamble. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," she announced over the fleet communication system. "6 months ago, they caught us by surprise and made us look weak. Today, we show them what humans can do when we're properly motivated. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for every species in the galaxy that believes in freedom over conquest." The attack began with what appeared to be a suicide run. 12 human ships dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of the hegemony fleet, their weapons blazing as they charged toward the enemy formation. Sovereign Nexus watched with amusement as his forces prepared to swat down the annoying insects. But these weren't the same ships the hegemony had faced before. As the alien weapons fired, the human vessels seemed to phase in and out of existence, their metamaterial hulls shifting properties to deflect or absorb the incoming energy. Several ships took hits, but instead of exploding, they absorbed the damage and kept fighting. "Impossible," Nexus muttered as he watched his supposedly invincible weapons fail to stop the human attack. His tactical officers scrambled to adjust their targeting systems, But the human ships moved with impossible agility, weaving between shots that should have destroyed them. The real surprise came when Dr. Vasquez's resonance weapon was deployed. Hidden among the attacking ships, a specialized vessel fired a beam that seemed weak compared to the hegemony's massive weapons. But when it struck the lead alien ship, something extraordinary happened. The shield matrix that had protected the vessel for thousands of years simply collapsed, leaving the hull exposed to conventional weapons. Lieutenant Park and his fighter squadron dove through the gap in the hegemony's defenses, their small ships moving too fast for the massive alien weapons to track. They struck at the exposed vessel's weak points, targeting power conduits and shield generators with precision strikes that had been impossible during the first battle. The hegemony ship shuddered under the unexpected assault. For the first time in millennia, Sovereign Nexus felt something he had almost forgotten: fear. These humans were not the same species he had defeated 6 months ago. They had adapted, evolved, and turned their weaknesses into strengths. Commander Okafor coordinated the technical aspects of the battle from her position aboard the Indomitable. The resonance weapon required precise timing and positioning to be effective, and she guided her teams through the complex calculations needed to bring down each enemy shield in turn. As more hegemony shields failed, the human fleet pressed their advantage. The new ships proved their worth, dancing around the larger alien vessels like wolves attacking a herd of massive but slow-moving prey. Each human ship was connected to the others through an advanced tactical network that allowed them to coordinate their attacks with machine-like precision. The tide of battle turned quickly. The hegemony had grown arrogant over the millennia, relying on their technological superiority rather than tactical flexibility. When their primary advantage was neutralized, they found themselves outmaneuvered by an enemy they had underestimated. Sovereign Nexus realized that retreat was his only option, but even that proved impossible. The human fleet had positioned themselves perfectly, cutting off escape routes and forcing the alien ships into an ever-tightening trap. One by one, the mighty hegemony vessels fell to the combined assault of humanity's new fleet. As his flagship took critical damage, Nexus found himself facing Admiral Chen on a direct communication channel. The human woman's expression was calm but determined, showing none of the fear he had expected to see. "This is impossible," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "Your species is barely 50 years out of your home system. You cannot defeat an empire that has existed for millions of years." Admiral Chen's response was delivered with quiet confidence. "You're right about one thing. We are young compared to your empire, but that's exactly why we won. You've had millions of years to become set in your ways, to believe that your superiority was permanent. We've had 6 months to learn from our mistakes and find a better way." The final hegemony ship surrendered rather than face destruction, its crew acknowledging defeat for the first time in their species' recorded history. Sovereign Nexus himself was taken prisoner, though he would later be released with a message for any other ancient powers that might consider challenging the new order in the galaxy. Dr. Vasquez's resonance weapon technology was shared freely with the Federation, ensuring that no single species could again dominate through technological superiority alone. The quantum principles behind the weapon opened new avenues of research that would benefit all peaceful civilizations. Lieutenant Park became the youngest pilot ever to receive the Federation's highest honor for valor, though he always insisted that the real heroes were the engineers and scientists who had made victory possible. His fighter squadron became the model for new tactical units that would protect Federation space for generations to come. As the human fleet regrouped and began the journey home, Admiral Chen reflected on what they had accomplished. The hegemony's defeat sent a clear message throughout the galaxy. The age of conquest through superior firepower was ending, replaced by an era where creativity and determination mattered more than ancient technology. Commander Okafor stood beside her, watching the stars through the viewport. "What happens now?" she asked. "The galaxy knows what we're capable of, but will they trust us not to become the next hegemony?" Chen smiled, understanding the question. "We prove ourselves through our actions, just like we always have. We protect those who can't protect themselves. We share our knowledge freely. And we never forget that our strength comes from working together, not from dominating others. The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying news of victory back to Earth and the Federation worlds. Behind them, the remains of the hegemony fleet began the long journey home, their crews forever changed by their encounter with a species that refused to accept defeat. Word of humanity's triumph spread quickly throughout the galaxy. Species that had cowered before the hegemony's advance suddenly found their courage, while other ancient powers reconsidered their own plans for conquest. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, not because humanity sought to rule, but because they had proven that even the mightiest empire could fall to those who refused to surrender. The war that was intended to end human expansion instead marked the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history. Humanity had taken their place, not as conquerors, but as guardians, showing that sometimes the youngest voice in the room has the most important things to say. The Crimson Fleet that had seemed doomed 6 months earlier had become the symbol of hope for every species that dared to dream of freedom.